John, NFA. What do you think of when you think of the NFA? What do
What do
you
you
think?
think? I think of fun, a lot of drinking, and a lot of good demos. No, just kidding. When I think of NFA, I just think of a good time getting all the pyros together and having a blast and seeing some awesome demos.
You know, I'm glad you said that because I think of the same thing. You know, fun, good times, convention, demos. Steve Hauser, Nancy Belogan, Larry. We got all those guys. We have a good time wherever we're at. But you know, they've been working really hard lately. Wanted to bring up something. We got these new guidelines presented. The multiple tube devices, cakes containing tubes with an inside diameter greater than 30 millimeters or 1.2 would be classified as 1.3. That could be a bad thing. And so the NFA has been following this issue, and as it's been progressing over the last couple of months, many rumors are going through, and I'm sure you've heard rumors too about what's going on with the problem. Many solutions, nobody knows what's going on. So at this time, there's no final conclusion to the current situation, but to get the message out there, to get the message to all our viewers and listeners, thought we'd get Steve and Larry from the NFA, and they could prove to you that they're much more than drinking and having fun, John. They actually do a good job for you while you're sitting snugly in your bed. They're out there working for you. So let's get some info from Steve and from Larry, and maybe we can get educated and educated all our listeners. What do you think?
I agree with that 100%. And yes, it's not all about fun. It's they do a lot of hard work for the industry. And just for the record, they're not doing it when I'm snuggled in my bed because I don't think they start till about 10 either. So I'm good there. I'm up by 10. But no, they've been doing a great job trying to rectify this. I'm online with China every night this time of year, especially because I'm doing it on their time zone and not mine. Normally, I'm away in China this time for the whole month, so it's been a little bit crazy too for me. So let's hope Larry and Steve have some good input, and let's see if we can learn anything and educate our viewers.
All right. No further ado, Steve and Larry, how you guys been? What's been going on?
Oh, we're good. Well, as you alluded to it, it just seems like, once you get past one problem, there's always another. So we've been wrangling with this 30 millimeter rule problem in China. It's kind of an interpretive problem. So we're dealing with that. And, of course, then right on the heels of that, we have the shipping problems that have crept up that are affecting us all. John, I'm sure you've been having these conversations overnight. But yeah, it seems like there's always something going on. And, the 30 millimeter thing is really kind of boiling down to probably being a diplomatic solution. It's an interpretive thing whereby the new CIQ authority, basically the China government has changed some things around over there with, who holds the export power keys, so to speak. And the new CIQ/customs has kind of come out, and they're basically saying that they're going to follow the UN model regulation recommendations. And problem, for American fireworks with that is that in those model regulations, recommendations, they aren't laws per se, but they're guidelines. They have a thing in there that says anything that is over 1.2 inches or 30 millimeters in inside diameter or a preloaded tube, meaning tube shots or cakes predominantly, that default rates to a 1.3G device, unless they have it UN Series 6 bonfire tested, which the way China interprets that, the device will fail because they want to put them on their sides. And under that rule, if it goes more than 15 meters, if it shoots any kind of what they call fiery projection more than 15 meters from the bonfire site, then it automatically fails that test. So it falls back into the 1.3 realm. It's very problematic. It's interpretive. The U.S. doesn't look at it the exact same way China does. And, one of the reasons that we're so dead set against it from the NFA standpoint is, U.S. fireworks, consumer fireworks, 1.4G are the safest in the world. And, you know, this is a transportation and storage problem, is how China's looking at it. This isn't a safety thing or a performance thing. It has to do with transportation and handling and storage. And, you know, there's never been an instance where U.S. consumer grade 1.4G fireworks have ever resulted in a mass explosion casualty event. And that's because our product has powder limits. We use tube separation to, you know, limit propagation from one explosion to the next. But by trying to apply this straight 30 millimeter rule, it affects a huge swath of U.S. cakes. Pretty much any 500 gram cake that's 16 shots or fewer is going to get caught up in this thing. And that's a ton of product that's used here in America. So it's something that's been, you know, talked about, you know, the proverbial cussed and discussed, you know, not only by the manufacturers, but, you know, information here and going overseas. And it's been difficult because of the fact that we can't physically get there with all these travel restrictions. So, you know, trying to get the message out and trying to work with them on coming to a solution.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, so in case some people have missed it or they're a little behind, basically what's going on is they want to anything with this, as you say, a 16 shot or less, 500 grams with the 1.2 or the 30 millimeters. They want to ship those in basically what affects what is a cage, right? A metal cage, and it's basically something that's similar or identical to what they do in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, the metal cage has come into this because the Netherlands, you know, they have these metal cages that they require their fireworks to be wrapped in before they're placed in the shipping carton. Now, keep in mind, those cakes over there, you know, could be the size of a coffee table. And you could have 250 or 300 shots in those things with no tube separation. And they use flash powders over there, salute cakes, things like that. That, you know, America, we don't use, can't use. And so the metal cage came up because it was something that had been done. And it was somebody saying, well, why not use it for the American stuff? The problem with the metal cage is, you know, there's a lot of them, you know, problems. But, you know, right up the front, they're expensive. You know, they're saying $8 to $10 per case increased cost, which, you know, I think is a little steep. Somebody told me they thought that a few years ago you could get these metal cages for a couple bucks, but now all of a sudden we're $8 to $10. The other problem with them is that, you know, I don't think that we should accept that at all, because the biggest issue with the metal cage, in my opinion, is that if we start saying we're going to wrap our fireworks in metal cages to have them transported, we're effectively saying our fireworks are so dangerous that they have to have these metal cages wrapped around them. And that is the wrong message that we need to be sending to the American market. You know, not everybody in America loves fireworks. You know, I mean, there's opponents out there. And if we kind of as an industry just take this metal cage thing, swallow the pill and start shipping them, then I think the enemies of fireworks will use that as ammunition against us and say, hey, the industry even admits their stuff's so dangerous it has to be wrapped in metal cages. So why do we want to have that sold to children? You know, because that's where they'll go with it. But the metal cage thing was proffered as a solution, you know, as kind of a short-term fix of saying, well, if you do this, right now we're better than that in terms of the solution that is being done. They did come back and say that through the end of November, anything that was manufactured could be shipped out as 1.4, and it doesn't have to be shipped by the end of November. It just has to be manufactured by the end of November, as long as the item has a 9 millimeter thick, kind of like a press board, almost kind of like what we'd call MDF over here, on top of the cakes before they seal the box. So, that'll increase the weight of them noticeably, and there is going to be some increased cost, but certainly not $10 a box, and certainly not to the point of a steel cage that would be a nuisance to try to get into, because you're going to have to cut into that thing with wire cutters. I mean, you don't just get to open it up. So imagine, from John's standpoint, having to unload all these cakes out and put them on your shelves for retail. That's going to take a lot of time, and you're going to have to be real careful when you're doing it. Otherwise, you're going to start ripping labels.
Yeah, that, and also look at the landfills that we'd be filling up if you went across and just calculate all the cases that we all import, and then we have somewhere we have to dump that. So it's going to be, it's almost not even imaginable. I mean, it's just a lot of work. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, you would get in your warehouse, take it out of the cage, and then stack it on the pallet racking, I would guess, right?
Well, we would just leave it in the shipping cart.
You would. Okay.
I'm a so we would just have it it's just going to be in the shipping carton. So when we ship it out to the customer, they're going to have to open up the box, and they're going to have to manhandle that cage.
Okay, I wasn't sure how you were, if we had to go that route of how we would do it. Yeah, I just wonder how that's going to stack, on a pallet. No, we stack them on pallets, we shrink wrap them, move them to the other warehouse. I don't even know how they would stack.
Yeah, well, they'll certainly be heavier, but
yeah,
I've seen specialty fireworks devices that have had steel cages around them. In terms of the product being kind of protected or bolstered in terms of strength of the shipping carton. Well, it certainly is going to do that, but at what cost? I think the long-term cost is too much to bear.
I definitely agree. And I've heard, as like you said, I've heard between 8 and 10, and then factory told me, well, more realistically 4. But still, any cost onto the already expensive items that we import now is certainly not warranted. So, yeah, we certainly have to get over that hurdle. But it seems like a lot of the factories are, even though some of my stuff's made, they're still in limbo on shipping because they don't know yet about these metal cages. So I'm not sure how much the factories even know about this regulation so far.
Well, I've traded information exchanges with the Luoyang Fireworks Manufacturing Association. I'm not quite sure what their name is. I call them the Luoyang Fireworks Association. Some other people call them the Luoyang Fireworks and Firecracker Association. I'm not sure what their real name is, but it'd be similar to an NFA of sorts in China, sort of a peer group. And the last big meeting, I want to say it was around the 9th of October. And that was when it was officially announced that they would allow this 9 millimeter thick board to be placed on top of the cakes when, the last one. So, John, you think, you have a 4-1 500-gram cake, and there's 4, they're stacked, 2 and 2. So you got to put one of these boards on that top layer before you seal the shipping carton. Well, you're going to have to remake your shipping cartons because, 9 millimeters is almost a centimeter. Shipping cartons don't have that much extra space built into them. So they'll have to remake the cardboard. And right now, I think a lot of the factories are trying to focus on manufacturing only devices over 30 millimeters because they can until the end of November. They could ship in January or February, but they have to get them manufactured before the end of November. But still, that's the short-term fix. We're less than 45 days away from that, so we've got to come to a real long-term answer. And steel cages are just not it, because if they're trying to say they're trying to increase safety, I don't think the steel cage does that. If anything, in some theoretical sense, I think it almost make it worse because you're going to constrict and confine.
I would think it would make it like its own big bomb. That's the way I look at it when you put it in a metal cage and constrict it.
Yeah, I certainly think your propagation risk of the explosion is increased as opposed to when it's just in a wood box. The idea is that they're trying to prevent an expulsion of stars, but I don't see that if you have a box, a group of cakes in a box and they all catch on fire and they all start going off, I don't see how that steel cage is actually going to hold itself. I think it's going to blow open. And then you've just got metal shrapnel, so, and we've done some testing on this at the NFA, and that's kind of where we're coming from with that information, is that, we've done the bonfire test. We've burned this stuff. We've stacked it. We've done it the way China says they would do it. We've done it the way the U.S. does it. And the real problem is when you look at that 6C and it says fiery projection in that 6C bonfire test. Well, fiery projection, as it's understood in America, would be true, let's say, quote unquote, shrapnel, knowing that there's obviously not any metal shrapnel pieces. But if the cake was to blow and we saw remains of the cake, cardboard chunks and tubes flying 15 meters away, that would be a problem, and that would be indicative of a mass explosion event. But we don't count in the States the stars or the inserts because the intended function of the device is to shoot that item, certainly more than 15 meters. But what we're trying to make sure of is that this thing, if it catches on fire, doesn't go, in one fell swoop, boom. And U.S. fireworks don't do that. Instead, they just go off and go off and go off and go off, and they take quite a bit of time. It's not just 1 second and the whole thing goes up.
My question is why now? Why all of a sudden has this come up? Is this a direct result of the explosions that they had in China back in December?
That's the exact impetus for it.
Okay.
And coming out in the October newsletter that the NFA just went to print last week. I've got a paper in there that kind of goes into a lot of this detail, certainly from a, really drilling down type basis. But, as a result of that accident, there were a lot of changes that Beijing made to make sure that it didn't happen again. And it included a lot of personnel changes in the CIQ office in Changsha. And when that happened, the guy who got put there and put in charge, he was told to make sure that kind of an accident doesn't happen again. And keep in mind, that accident was not making U.S. consumer 1.4G fireworks. They were making a lot of Euro stuff, a lot of the more flash powder based product and, much more volatile. So they weren't making John and I's, 16 shot 500 gram cakes or our 200 gram cakes. They weren't doing that. But, that Changsha boss, CIQ boss up in Changsha, his job is to make sure accidents don't happen. It's not to make sure that a lot of fireworks get exported. Right. And what he did was, there was no real rule that was in writing for him to follow. So he just went straight to the UN thing. And, you also think about this, if Ron, if you get put in a position with which you're not terribly familiar, meaning, okay, next week I'm going to put you in charge of a chemical lab, and you've got to run the lab. Well, you're not a chemist, you don't know, okay? So you're not familiar with the lab, right? So you go grab a sheet of paper and it says, do this, and you read it literally, because you don't understand how it applies. It's a lot of times, there are rules that are written, but they're intended to be used in ways subject to interpretation. But in this particular case, he's reading fiery projection, and he's saying that includes a star. Whereas when it comes over here to America, when we actually test things and test fireworks for EX numbers or for new explosive classification, they do not count a star expelling to be a negative, because that is the intended function of the device. And keep in mind, even a 200 gram cake set on its side in a bonfire, a 200 gram cake with, say, a tube diameter of 20 millimeters, which was already given a pass as a 1.4. Well, if you put it on its side and it's going to burn, it's going to shoot stuff more than 15 meters. So the UN rule kind of falls at odds with itself there in interpretation.
It sounds eerily familiar to the issue we had with the CPSC when we were going through the metals and the fireworks, where people that aren't knowledgeable or don't have any understanding of what they're trying to legislate and regulate, and they're trying to pass a law. But right, and I say that about being the banker. I say that about credit all the time. It's not their job to make loans; it's their job to make sure loans don't go bad. But their job and my job completely contradict each other. Same thing. This guy just wants to make sure everything's safe. If no explosions happen, he's happy, right?
Correct.
But how? I mean, so you're trying to change, or you're trying to affect the what they do in China. Is that possible? I mean, if they pass out this regulation, or if they deem this is the way it's going to be from now on, don't you just have to grin and bear it and pay the extra $5 a case and deal with metal cages, or is there a solution?
Well, I hope there's a solution. Right now we've been trying to educate. Right now, it's an education thing. It's going back and saying, Mr. Changshaw, CIQ boss, we understand where you're coming from, and here's our case. U.S. fireworks are not the problem. They've never been involved in an incident where there's been a mass explosion and a loss of life. Will they burn and make a mess? Yes. Then we also have to teach them on how we interpret the law, how the law is applied here in the United States. And then there also goes back to the way it's always happened in the past. They manufactured it based upon the requirements of the country for which the export was destined. Like I said in one of my papers, it's like if you have a refrigerator. Okay, well, over there, the refrigerators run on propane. Well, if they manufacture all their refrigerators that they're exporting to America be propane based, they aren't going to work when they get here. So they make them to be electrically operated and to run on 110 volt, so that they work when they get here. So why are fireworks all of a sudden becoming different? And really the reason is because you have a new person in charge, and he's not intimately familiar with the fireworks side of things. So, we're trying to get them educated. That Luoyang Fireworks Association has been helping with that. One of the things that we've talked about, and I've talked about this with some members of the NFA, some large exporters and importers type members, is maybe the NFA needs to take a lead charge and start a global fireworks consortium, to try to work through these things. And work with the Luoyang Fireworks Association and have them be a member of this consortium, or I don't know what you'd call it, but a Global Fireworks Association, the GFA, to try to do some of this. But there are ways to find people in China, law firms, lawyers, or someone, and maybe get that person to get you somebody in Beijing that can go communicate your message. Clearly they don't have lobbying like we do, like we think of it here in America. But, we're trying to educate, and that's the first thing that we have to do. And if we can't get past it at the end of the day, then yeah, we've got a real problem with the metal cage issue being there. But, our fireworks have been shipped for 50 some years without problems. So why can't they continue to be shipped for 50 more?
Consortium sounds like a great idea, but it also sounds very expensive.
It would be expensive, but unfortunately, anything that involves government or anything like that turns out to be an expensive proposition. And it's a cost that industries have to face all the time. It's just that, right now here in the fireworks industry, it seems like all of a sudden that's what we've been getting hit with year after year. I mean, we just get past the metals thing and now we've got this thing. The other thing that we want to do is we want to engage, and the NFA has already done this. We've reached out to our friends and allies in Capitol Hill. But let's be honest, this is an election year. There is nothing going to be happening diplomatically for a while. And certainly not before Election Day. So We've notified people. It's just that there's nothing moving in Washington. Because what we really need to do is we need to get our trade people involved with, the China people so that we can talk through this whole thing. And we need to have their help, because Steve Hauser can't go to Beijing and start meeting with the powers that be. That's not the way that works.
I say we send, John would say we send Bruce Zolden.
I'd send anybody that could get there and talk to them.
Right.
But, unfortunately, it's a different animal. And yeah, trying to effectuate change in China is quite a bit different proposition than it is here. So, there's methods for these things to happen between countries. It's just that they have to happen at a diplomatic level.
Yeah, and I would just say, like Steve hit it on the head, like it's an election year and there's happening now. People's focuses are, I'll just say it because it's always possible that if there's a change in U.S. leadership, then there's going to be a whole nother set of folks who come in, and it's going to take time to get them up to speed and start implementing their own policies. So it could even some sort of resolution towards that Steve and the NFA are working on could get further delayed as we wait for a new administration to come in and kind of get caught up to speed.
It seems that unfortunately, because of the factories making our products are also making the European products, we kind of get thrown in the loop and blamed for a lot of the accidents when it really isn't our fireworks that are causing the accidents. But there's really no way to change that in China. So it seems that we're going to keep getting blamed or just thrown in the loop with all the rest of the accidents that happen.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's really no way you certainly don't want to separate the factories because that's not even feasible or not going to happen, and it's a great expense, and they're not going to incur it for the European small market, and then also when our market is without theirs, it's going to be small as well. So yeah, we're going to have to, we really have to focus on really educating them ourselves, like you said, and hopefully we don't have to get the government involved because that is going to take some time. And we can just keep beating them down with our fireworks are not the cause of these accidents. They're using those cages in the Netherlands, Germany as well. I think they're also using them for the Poland market as well, right?
I'm not sure.
I know the German.
Folks. I know it was the Netherlands folks that started them.
Yeah, and I know they're using them in Germany as well now. But like you say, some of those cakes are 1,000 grams. So it's a big difference between what we're shipping over there and what they're shipping to us.
Yeah, 1,000 grams of flash powder based with no tube separation,
Yeah.
And here we are with, 12.8 millimeters minimum, for anything that's over 200 grams. And that's the limit. One tube setting the other one off at the same time.
And like you say, some of those cakes are, 200-300 shots, and some are, 3 feet by 3 feet. I couldn't even lift one by myself. It takes two people to carry some of those cakes. So it's a different animal altogether. And to loop our small cakes in with theirs, it's just, and not only that, but the expense, is just going to be detrimental to the industry.
Yeah.
Well, and I think beside the expense was what Steve was trying to say earlier was that by allowing these cages, because it's the path of least resistance, right? Oh, we got these cages, let's throw them on there, and that'll be the end of it. But you're worried about what message that sends to everyone else, like these products must be faulty. Oh, we have to put them in cages, or they must be dangerous. We have to put them in cages when the data really doesn't support that. It is some of the most safest fireworks. How is the U.S. the largest fireworks market for China?
I'm not so sure that by the time you think about all of Europe, that all of Europe is probably a larger market than the United States. Because, there's a lot of bodies over there, and, they use a lot of fireworks for, particularly New Year's obviously is huge. But I obviously, America gets all their fireworks from China, so China is huge for us, in terms of consumer fireworks, because we can't really get many made anywhere else. We just don't have other people don't have the production capacity. But, I'm not sure whether our fireworks total more than the European market or not. There's been some that say yes, some that say no. I haven't seen any hard data on it, but I haven't looked.
Certainly a significant amount.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as
Yeah.
Steve has always pointed out, as Steve has always pointed out, that the wage and the regulatory environment doesn't lend itself to manufacture them here. So that's kind of the only source, right, for us right now. So.
Yeah, that's what I said. I would definitely say based on what I've seen, I'd say the European market is bigger than ours. That's why the two cannot exist singly. Together it's one nice big market, but together separated it wouldn't be advantageous for any of the factories to go one way without the other. So, that being said, I really do believe the European market's probably bigger than ours, but they have a lot more ups and downs than we do, especially with their currency, and that changes from year to year. So I guess it would be pretty close, I would say, at this point.
All right. Well, that's a lot of good information, and we know Steve and Nancy and the rest of the folks at the NFA will be working hard for everyone's best interest in the fireworks industry. So, you mentioned a chipping problem. What's that? A shipping problem or chipping problem? Shipping. What's the shipping problem?
Shipping. Right now there's some problems getting containers to move out of Shanghai because I don't know. I think there's some differences of opinion. And right now they've got the Shanghai Expo, the Export Expo going on, and that actually runs through mid-November. So there has been real talk of limiting the movement of all artillery shells, any cakes with tubes greater than 45 millimeters in diameter, or any rockets greater than 30 millimeters. The products that fall into those categories would not be allowed to be shipped out until the end of the Shanghai Export Expo, which that's horrible for us here in America right now, because we've come off of such a wonderful 4th of July. Inventory levels are depleted, across the board, certainly with importers like myself. We had a great 4th of July. Our customers had great 4th of Julys, Well, think of all those people in the South that are trying to get inventory for the new Christmas, New Year season, and so, we're trying to make sure we can get all this stuff imported. And now we've hit another roadblock. We roadblocked coming into the production season with this 30 millimeter rule, which delayed a lot of stuff because, like Johnny said earlier, a lot of factories weren't going to make stuff. They weren't sure which way this was going to go. So they kind of sat there idle for a while. And then about the time they finally got direction, that ran into a China holiday, which lasted a week. And now they've come back to start making. And now we run right into this problem with this export problem. And that includes artillery shells. All artillery shells. Well, right now, everybody in the U.S. wants artillery shells to try to get through the Christmas, New Year season. So it's just one more headache. It just seems like the hits they're not stopping. It's 2020.
Missed the convention, Steve. It's the first time we talked to you since the convention days came and went. How did you just sit at home and light a little votive candle and just do a novena and say, hope we can meet all in Mobile come the fall spring?
Yeah, we're planning on Mobile. We've got everything set up for it. We've just got to get there. The registrations are going to go out. I think Nancy's going to send those out around the 1st of December. It's going to be talked about in the newsletter that just went out last week. So we can start getting people registered for that. Yeah, it's really sad what happened with the expos this year. We had the spring one, which was right at the onset of the COVID problem. That basically made that a non-event, sadly, because so many people were stuck right at the point of COVID. So nobody was really showing up. And then the expo, the big fall expo, had to be canceled outright because we were right in the middle of, we were coming off COVID, or, it still hadn't changed. And, those things are real critical for the NFA because that's the NFA's fundraiser, and we just lost them. And this is coming off the heels of a 3-year fight that we had with, the medals ban, which, we prevailed because the NFA was fortunate that they, we have a very shoestring budget. We're miserly. And, the NFA had not had a major issue that it had to, fight for quite some time. So they saved and saved and saved and saved and saved and had a war chest to take on the medals thing. That war chest is not a war chest anymore. It got depleted. And now we've come off of losing, our 2 fundraisers, in the year following that. So, right now is the time that, I'm also as president of the NFA, we're working on all these problems, but, the board also has the charge of keeping the NFA's doors open, and we're actually going to be, kind of getting ready to launch a fundraising campaign because, it's the hard truth. It takes money to be the NFA. And the NFA can't be there for its members and do what it does without money. And when you don't have your fundraisers, you're going to have to create a new fundraiser, and that's going to have to be a direct campaign. And, fortunately, I've talked with a number of customers of mine who are also NFA members, and they said, sign me up, just tell me what you need. One of them said, how much you need? $1,000? You need me to give you $5,000? He said, I had a great year. Consumer fireworks this year were great. He had a great year. He knows that he needs to, the NFA needs help. And, I said, $1,000 would be great because if we've got over 800 members and we could get $1,000 from each of them, war chest back in play, problem solved. And, but people are going to have to be willing to commit to these type of things, and, yeah, we didn't have the expo. They probably would have spent a lot more than $1,000 going to it anyway. But, the NFA needs its members and the members need its NFA. They need the NFA.
I agree.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ron, that, Steve mentioned the medals ban. I mean, and let's just be clear about where the CPSC came down on that is that they chose not to accept the staff recommendation, but the staff recommendation isn't going away. It's still there, and they could easily bring that back up. And I mentioned before that there's a change in that there's an election, and if a certain person gets into, or whoever's elected is gonna because the CPSC currently right now is at a 4-4 or a 4-seat. They need a fifth commissioner. Somebody's going to have to appoint one, and we look at the very real possibility of having an anti-firework commissioner that's appointed. So it's important to be engaged on these issues, and like Steve said, talking about it's not easy to answer your question, Ron. Steve's kind of gone down this. What we're doing about the China 30 millimeter policy, but it's painstaking work to reach out to our senators and our congressmen and let them know what's happening so they can kind of BRI and send letters, and that's all things that the NFA has to do. There's the other issue that's out there is that we're keeping an eye on. Mark and I are, is that the CPA in the operating budget for implementing anything with the rule, but also, there were some other organizations that came and said, we think that you guys need to more strictly enforce fireworks that are being sold at the tents and the roadside stands across the country. And, we need to, you guys should have fire marshals that go out there and kind of do that inspection for you, since the CPSC doesn't have it. Doesn't have that capability, that bandwidth. So, there are a lot of, as I always say, there's a lot of alligators that are really close to the boat, and we're trying to fight back all of them. But as Steve said, we need a strong fundraising base, and we need people to be bought into it. So it's important. It's important to do that, because I've been around DC and I've done a lot of this type of work. And, I've worked with some organizations who have $80 million a year budgets, which would be great. I'm sure Steve would love to have that. But the thing is that, for dollar, the value and the results that the people get from their membership and their dues in the NFA, it's very cheap, and we're efficient, and we're effective. So
I think miserly was the word he used.
Well, I didn't want to say that.
I like that word. That's a good one. And
yeah,
the spring NFA wasn't non-eventful. I saw John drinking whiskey out of a paper cup, and I'd never seen that before in 40 years. So something happened at the Spring Expo. So it was fun. We got to hang out with the Dominator guys, right? It's always a good time.
Yeah, it was fun, but like you say, for the great purpose of NFA, the only reason I had time to sit with those Dominator guys, I really had nothing else to do. I'm sure they'll love that answer, but anyway, no, we managed to have fun. We managed to stay together as a group. All important in any type of organization like the NFA. And I agree with Steve. Everybody had a good year. Unfortunately, there's not all members are dealers, so that's where we're going to come into a little bit. So if the dealers can maybe step up and give a little bit more to make up for some of the members that aren't really dealers and just like to go and have a good time, and see a bunch of demos. I think the dealers are going to have to pony up a little bit more this year to see if we can keep things going. Definitely.
And there's a lot of good stuff on those letters you sent me earlier. Is that all available on your website, the NFA website? All the letters and things that I got earlier, or those will be up on the website? A lot of good information.
They will be.
Okay. Yeah. So anyone listening to this, you want to get more information, you want to read about it, go to the NFA website. What is it again, Steve?
SaveOurFireworks.com.
Okay, SaveOurFireworks.com. There's a bunch of letters, a bunch of different things out there, a bunch of stuff you can read about this, and we've said it a lot of times, but when your two biggest fundraisers go down up in flames, that doesn't necessarily mean there's not a need for capital to fight the fights that seem to keep on coming in this 2020. Eddie Van Halen dying, that was the end of it for me. 2020 is so horrible.
That was a sad day.
Yeah, that's a horrible day for me. So that was bad. But
first album I ever owned.
Yeah.
I'm a tad bit younger than you all gentlemen, but that was the first album that I ever owned. It was 1984.
I've gone to 2 concerts with John in my whole life, and I think one of them was Van Halen.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So, but anyway. Well, that's great. Anything else you guys want to say?
Well, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, so okay. I'm going to give you a positive quote. I got to do my quote thing. We've got a lot of stuff going on at the NFA. A lot of it seems like we're struggling and fighting, and my stress levels are running high. Because this is kind of stuff that keeps me up at night, and believe me, it really does keep me up at night. But here's my quote for the day. When everything seems to be going against you, remember that the airplane takes off against the wind, not with it. Henry Ford.
I like that. I got one for you. In these days, with the election, however many days away, with all the goofiness.
15. Not that I'm counting.
15 days, with the goofiness that's going on. See if you can tell me which president said this. My choice early in life was either to be a piano player in a whorehouse or a politician. And to tell you the truth, there's really no difference. Who said that?
That sounds like a Teddy Roosevelt.
That was Harry Truman.
Yeah, I was going to say Harry Truman.
Yeah, I thought that was quite appropriate.
Sounds. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of that T-shirt I used to wear. I don't tell my mother I sell timeshare. I'm a piano player in a whorehouse. I told her I was a piano player in a whorehouse.
If you would have told me who said that, I wouldn't have guessed Harry Truman. I would have guessed Will Rogers, because he echoed a lot of those sentiments toward Washington D.C. just in general. Most people still do these days, anyways. But
yeah, I think that's been used quite a bit. This one is attributed to Harry Truman anyway. So, but guys, have a great October. Stay safe. I'm very envious of you, Steve, because I see the Kansas City, I see the Chiefs playing, and I see people in the stands, which makes me sad that we can't have people in the stands watching football games here or baseball games or whatever. But hopefully that time will come soon.
But you know what, Ron? I need to point out the Bears are now 5-1, and they're tied with the Packers for the AFC North lead.
They're a horrible 5-1. I don't know how that happened.
No idea. They ask how many.
No idea how 5-1 happened with that team. But yeah, I'm a Steelers fan, so but I'm just envious that I can watch the games in Kansas City. I always think of Steve, and I'm like, man, oh man, they got people in the stands there. And here in Chicago, I mean, just the amount of commerce that's not taking place is just mind-boggling to me because of this. So, but hopefully we get it straightened out at some point. Right?
It's mine. Well, Ron, thanks for having me.